من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور. Well, actually, let's start. I recited ayat number 109. We can start from 108 inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وما الله يريد ظلما للعالمين. So that's ayat number 108. Here Allah Azza wa Jal says, تِلْكَ آيَاتُ اللَّهِ نَتْلُوهَا عَلَيْكَ بِالْحَقِّ. These are indeed the signs of Allah which we recite upon you in all truth. وَمَا اللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And indeed Allah does not desire or does not want oppression for any of creation. Thereafter, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورُ. And to Allah belongs everything in the heavens and everything in the earth, and to Allah will all things return. Al-umur are not just things, but the affair of everything. We'll explain in detail, bi'idhnillah, what all of that means. So these ayat are actually related to each other in subject matter. However, each sentence is said in such a way, it's presented, each ayah is presented in such a way that they're in and of themselves, they present a separate, completely separate subject matter. However, when they're put all together, they're explaining one and the same subject, if that makes sense. So it's almost like, there's three different sentences here actually. There's tilka ayatullahi natluha alayka bil haqq. That's actually one sentence, a complete sentence. These are the signs of Allah which we recite upon you in truth. The next sentence, which is a complete sentence as well, وَمَا اللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And Allah does not desire or want. The irada is the root word of yuridu, that He does not want or desire oppression for anything that exists. And the third sentence, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. And actually the fourth sentence, وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورُ. So it starts out with tilka. This is kind of like the beginning, if you would. It was almost, if you could, I guess maybe you could put this into a paragraph. It's one way we could understand it by translating it in English. At the beginning of this paragraph starts with the statement that these are the signs of Allah which are recited upon you in all truth. So that is that the other, or the previous ayat before, the subject matter explained there, is part of the ayat of Allah. That is, ayat are not just verses, but they actually mean proofs, signs. A sign, alamat, meaning that when you see a sign, it is indicative of something. So these are ayat and signs revealed to you by Allah in all truth, describing, and the other ayat that came before it, describing in detail the Ahlul Kitab, and then describing in detail your position and the position of all those who have true Iman. That we recite this to you in all truth. And we remind you, then this is the second subject, although a totally different sentence. So wa here, like the harf in Arabic, wow, wa, it's almost like a comma in English. So you're kind of continuing the same subject, but you're actually using, if you will, it's almost like a separate sentence in and of itself. So the wow here denotes that there's a subject being continued, but we notice that the subject is being continued in such a way that it's a sentence that is complete in and by itself. It's a statement that is complete in and of itself, which is وَمَا اللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. And Allah does not desire or want oppression for any of creation. And how does that relate it? Because we're talking about, for instance, reward and punishment. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ يَبْيَضَّتْ وُجُوهُهُمْ فَفِي رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ. Those people whose faces will be enlightened and shining, not literally white but from the joy that they feel, it will seem that there is a light coming from them, emanating from them. Those faces on the day of judgment who have that eminent light of joy and happiness are the ones who are in the rahmah of Allah. So there's a clear distinction. Before that, فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ. Then taste the punishment of that which you have disbelieved. Taste the punishment of that which you had denied. So is a clear difference here between those who denied Allah and what their result will be, and those who accepted Allah and what their result will be. So a lot of questions come up in our minds even now. We always like to ask questions, and we say that, well, how is this, if you will, fair, if God will just punish some and then reward others? What is the fault of them if God created them and God made them a certain way? Why and how well, let's put it this way: why would Allah punish some people? Is this not some type of, if you will, a punishment like from a God? In this case, is it some type of oppression? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this clear. First of all, these are the ayat of Allah that we recite upon you in truth. Meaning these are signs that we recite upon you of the reality and nature of the creation, that we are reciting it upon you to tell you of a reality that is not known to you yet, which is the reward and punishment on the day of judgment. But in this, if we are to reward some, if we punish some, فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ, taste the punishment of that which you have just denied. And if we reward some, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ بِيَضَّتْ وُجُوهُهُمْ فَفِي رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, that some of these people who will be, in absolute joy and basking in the rahmah of Allah. We do this not because we intend to oppress anything in existence, لِلْعَالَمِينَ, anything that has been created that exists other than Allah, مَا سِوَى اللَّهِ. There is no intent from Allah's side to punish, in the sense that it is dhulm, right? So it's important here to understand the meaning of this ayah. It actually answers many of our questions, because the idea that Allah would ever want to oppress someone, that, in other words, sometimes we think that Allah created us, Allah knows us, and He knows what we're going to do, and then He'll punish us. Is this not some type of if this punishment is not some type of oppression? And so the answer would be no, that it is His irada, that Allah's will is never, according to this ayah, it is never connected to oppression. So there's never an incident where Allah would punish a person or something or someone where it is connected at all with dhulm, that is connected with some type of oppression. And to understand that, we go further on and we say, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ, or Allah says, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that to Allah belongs everything that exists in the heavens and anything that exists on the earth. As is said classically in the tafsir, and that this means, of course, the things that exist in the heavens and the earth, that which you know and that which you don't know. Ma here is in its most general sense. Whatever may exist in the heavens and the earth, it all belongs to Allah. That means that Allah has absolute and complete control, and in that He has no need either of creation. Right? He has no need of anything. So what benefit would He get out of punishing someone? Okay, you punish because usually as humans, we punish people because there is in it a benefit for us or others. So a benefit for us is that by punishing, we assert our authority. You understand? We assert our authority so that other people won't think of crossing us. This ayah is denying that, because the authority is absolute for Allah, and He doesn't have to assert it. He already has it. وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ. Already everything in the heavens and the earth belong to Allah. Not only do they belong to Allah, وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ, that it's not just that He created them, but at-tasarruf, which is al-amr, that Allah does what He wants in the creation, and He is the absolute owner. This is what it means, lillahi, that it belongs. The lamb here, it denotes that it belongs to Allah exclusively. So why would he need to make a point by punishing someone so that other people will think twice of crossing him? Doesn't matter. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has reminded us, even if the whole world turned away from Allah, it doesn't reduce anything of his power or his majesty or the fact that he still controls it. That's the thing to remember here. So unlike humans, we will punish to assert our authority. Allah already has. أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ in Surah Al-A'raf. Be aware that to Allah belongs creation and the command over creation, meaning he creates things, he al-ijad bi-qudra, he makes things and brings things into existence, and he also has complete tasarruf, meaning he controls them as well. It is not just the creator who is aloof, he is the one that every affair of the universe returns to him. So in other words, his tasarruf, just like his creation is absolute, he creates everything and no one is a partner with him in this attribute. And also at tasarruf, he has complete command over everything. To everything alone, it all belongs to him. So again, the point in comparison, a human will punish to assert their authority. Allah in this ayah is telling us there's no reason to assert his authority because everything belongs to him anyhow. So then therefore there's no benefit in him just punishing. Okay? You understand?
Imam, I'm sorry. Can I ask? I want to ask a question. Can I ask one? Because I'm going to lose my train of thought.
Okay. Yeah.
So Allah, obviously is infinitely just, and the only crime, quote unquote, that he will not forgive is associating partners with him.
Right.
But that the penalty for that crime is infinite. You will be in hell indefinitely. Correct?
Yeah.
So if a person is struggling, right, and eventually never finds the truth, I mean, can we, because the penalty, there's no return for ultimately, right? So can we then say that, despite that person struggling, there's something, because the penalty is so vast, it's so heavy that Allah would never, he's infinitely just, he would never, the penalty would never exceed the crime.
Right.
Right.
So look at the ayah before this, like the one I recited, ayah 106. Okay, 106. Taste the punishment that you have, in other words, because of what you have denied. So this is the point I'm coming to, is that if Allah punishes, it's not because he needs to assert his authority, because he has authority already, absolute authority. He has no need to assert his authority, correct?
Yes.
Right, so he won't benefit himself by punishing. So the punishment, therefore, is only because of, that's why it's called jaza. Jaza literally means you get exactly what you deserve. These jaza'an bima kanu ya'malun. They get the reward of exactly what they used to do. So kufr, as it said here, فَذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ, denying Allah is such that it is a just reward that you are punished this way. Okay? Because the reasoning of it is that if you know that Allah is the sole proprietor of everything, of all good, and then you turn away deliberately, knowingly, right? Then what should be the reward of that? It's what you chose. You chose to turn away from the one being who's the sole proprietor of all good and the sole proprietor of all harm and all punishment and all of these things that we don't want. So why would we turn away from the sole proprietor of everything who gives everything and then turn to what? Turn to whom? After Allah, where will you go? There is nowhere to go except to Allah. So what you said earlier too is interesting, because you said people, if they try, the reality is that kufr is a state that is induced upon the human soul. The human soul has every capacity. This is what fitra means. The istidad, the capacity to accept the truth. And in a person's life, There will always be moments where they will realize that God is real, God is there, and they don't have control over things, and neither do other people have control over things, but yet they still choose to deny. I can't think of a better example than the current crisis that we're in. I haven't heard one of these people on news yet say anything about God.
Mm-hmm.
Not one. Not even Trump. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Through all of the problems that they're having, and they cannot for the life of them, with all of this expertise they have, all of the money and power they have, right? They're trying to figure out what to do, and they're still being stumped, and they don't know really what they're doing, and they're fumbling around like fools, and not in one breath have they ever said, pray, or this is from God, or you understand what I'm saying to say?
Right.
What sign do you want? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can literally grind the whole world to a halt, and yet you still won't admit that there's a higher force, publicly at least, you know? Wouldn't that have benefited someone to at least come out on a public forum and say, pray, acknowledge your creator, acknowledge the fact that we're not in control, and that there is something that we, outside of just like, how are we going to deal with this, by creating a vaccine and doing this and that and the other thing. That's all fine and good, but not one person has turned their focus to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's kufr in essence. You understand what I'm saying? It's a deliberate train of thought where even in cases like this, a person will never turn to their creator. So the just result of that, in other words, the just reward for your turning away and denying your creator, that's what kufr means. Kafara nujum, like literally there's a line of poetry, it says kafara nujum, it means to cover the stars. So the clouds in the nighttime, if they come and they cover the stars and you can't see them. So it's to cover the truth. It's like to indicate that every human soul has deep down inside them that capacity to realize the truth. If they don't realize it, is because of their own choice. So if they chose to deny the truth, if they chose to turn away from Allah, then what should be the just reward for them is that Allah turns away from them. كذلك نسيت آياتنا وكذلك اليوم تنسى. Like just as you forgot our signs, today also you will be forgotten. Allah cannot forget. That's not of his attributes. What does it mean? That just as you deliberately turned away, so the just reward for you for turning away is that Allah also will leave you alone. Does it make sense?
Yes, yeah, it does. I guess the frustrating thing is it's so obvious to us.
Right.
And it's frustrating in that it's the last thing on their mind. Yeah.
Because Allah has tested mankind by cloaking him with, as some describe, there is a tradition that's sound, that's very similar to the Old Testament tradition that God created Adam in his image. There is actually a hadith that mentions something close to that. And the explanation that we give is, of course, not anthropomorphic. God is not like his creation, so he's not a man. But what it means, the surah here, all right, the image, if you will. Surah is not just a physical image, also in Arabic, it could be used for other meanings. So the explanation is that Allah has cloaked mankind in certain attributes that are similar to him. In other words, like free will, like qudra, like power, the ability to choose between two acts, right? What are we going to do? And because of that, mankind is more prone to become arrogant and believe that they are God themselves. You see what I'm saying? This is the problem with us, is that especially that's why wealth in and of itself and power are not in and of themselves bad things. But if they're given in the hands of the wrong people, they become bad things because of the people. You understand what I'm saying? So wealth and power in and of itself are not bad things, but if they're given in the hands of the wrong people, they become bad things, not by themselves, but because of the badness, the evil that's within people. How so? That's why some shuyukh say that the trial of poverty is easier for most people than the trial of wealth. Because when a person reaches a certain stage that they really believe that they have enough power and wealth to do whatever they want, they begin to think that they themselves are gods, In other words, that they have absolute free will, okay? That they have absolute qudra. and they are omnipotent like God himself. They can do whatever they want. They become deluded. So humans, we have that kind of like, because we've been cloaked with certain attributes of like this free will and power, we begin to think that we don't have a need for Allah. We don't have a need for, that's the test. And it's greater for us than other creation, because malaika, they see the unseen realms, so the power and the qudra of Allah, they see it directly. And that's why Allah says that they will never disobey. All right. They're not going to disobey because they see it. The jinn, right, are like us, but they also, in that sense, they have free will and they have the ability to enact that will. But even in that case, they have certain limitations. They don't have the same power that we've been given. Sakharakum, like Allah has subjected the entire of the kawn, the entire of the universe to us, even the malaika. So the malaika were sent, meaning Jibreel alayhi salam, who is the greatest of all the malaika, was sent to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So literally the creation has been there to serve us. So imagine, in our minds, our hubris, the way we think of ourselves, we've been given all that by Allah. لَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. That human beings have been given this special station. So it's difficult for us because we have to now become humble. We've been given this in order, all this has been subjected to us so we can be the slave of Allah. But what happens is when a person is in ghafla and chooses kufr, they deny Allah and then they make basically themselves into their own gods. Okay? That's why it's called ittibal hawa. That guidance, the opposite of it, is following your own disposition, your likes and dislikes, because you're basically in essence making yourself your own God. So the only just reward for a person who denies Allah completely is that Allah will, if you will, deny him, meaning forget about him. You forgot about me, كَذَلِكَ يَوْمًا تُنْسَى, then you will also be forgotten. So that's why they cannot hope in the rahmah of Allah, because they chose that position for themselves. And this is the idea. So Allah is reminding us that Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala has never wanted, وَاللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ. He has never wanted to oppress, meaning, and it's not just wanting something. And irada, the root word of yurid, is a particular sifa of Allah. Like we just mentioned this, we have will, right? We have irada. So what does will mean to you when it comes to a human emotion? Anyone? What would will mean when we talk about a human, like irada? Well, put it simply, you want something, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? You want something.
Yeah. We want something. We intend something. Intention.
Right. So when you want something, it means that you're also choosing something, correct?
Yeah.
So you have a variety of choices, and you say, I want this. So that means that there is a choice there, okay? Like out of all of these things, this is what I want. So in terms of Allah, it's the definition of irada and what Allah's will is almost similar. Of course, it's not similar because it's Allah and His attributes are not like anything. But they say that irada sifatun azaliyatun yata'atta biha takhsisun mumkin bi ba'd ma yajuz alayh ala wifq al-in. So basically, the explanation here is this is like all the attributes of Allah. It is an eternal, or let's say like, a timeless attribute, which denotes the specification of anything that is rationally plausible. Again, saying that you had a choice. If there's a choice between anything, between like, a whole infinitude of possibilities. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifies that this is what is going to happen according to His knowledge of things. Okay? That's His irada. Just like we do something similar, we see a whole bunch of things in front of us and we say, that's the one I want. So based on what we might think, sometimes it's not based on knowledge, right? If you're a child, you choose it because it's shiny, right? Or it looks nice. And if you're a grown-up child, you do the same thing, right? You might not actually be thinking, just, oh, that looks good, right? So, we choose based on many different reasons, but Allah makes that choice based on knowledge. And that choice he does takhsis, meaning there's a whole bunch of possibilities, but in those possibilities, he chooses something specific. And part of the possibilities are sifat, meaning the qualities of something. So when he created what he creates, including us, he gives فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Every human soul has also its wickedness and its righteousness is proportioned as well. Okay? So Allah in His knowledge creates things based on that knowledge and His irada, meaning that this soul has the propensity to be good. This soul has the propensity, I created it to be wicked. After that, whatever a human being does, it is not dhulm. Allah does not, His decision cannot be based on dhulm, because He has simply created, right, in His knowledge what He knows to be true and knows to be the fact and knows to be, in other words, what is fits in the right place. Everything has been given its proper proportion. Everything has been given its right proportion in its right place. And in the wisdom of Allah, that means that some things are proportioned in a way that they are good, that they are beautiful, that they have a beautiful function in the universe, and some are not. And that's the balance of the universe. That's the demand of Allah's qualities, to show the complete and absolute power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He's not just relegated to do good, to create beautiful things. That in itself is a limitation, but He also creates things that are the opposite of that. So I hope that makes sense. The idea is that, again, that's why He reminds us that His irada cannot be attached to dhulm, because dhulm cannot be possible when it comes to Allah. One reason is, like we mentioned, that, for instance, to punish for humans, it has some of their own, they have their own purpose in mind, that to set an example and to prove their authority. Allah doesn't need to do that because He already owns everything anyhow. So He doesn't benefit from punishing. So why would He punish? Because He's giving what He has created, right, what they deserve, because they are, and they have the qualities and the specifications that they are they are literally they are the place where that punishment is to be manifested. And there's no other better place for it than that, because that's how they are. It is literally ذُوقُوا الْعَذَابَ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَكْفُرُونَ, that you will taste this punishment because of that which you denied. It is something that you have done, you have chose, and it is befitting of you because it is befitting of the qualities that you have. If you have a good soul, you acknowledge the truth and you become humble. If you have a wicked soul, you deny the truth and you become arrogant, right? And that is, by the way, also part of the secret to why people deny. And that's why I mentioned that, humans are we're a very unique creation, but we're tested with that uniqueness because arrogance seeps into us. So the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَنْ تَكَبَّرَ, whoever becomes arrogant, وَضَعُ اللَّهُ, Allah will belittle them. Allah will put them down. It is the nature of the universe, even in physics. What goes down goes up, and what goes up must go down. That's the way Allah has created things. So if you become arrogant, that's the essence of kufr. If you look at Iblis, what Allah said about him before he even mentioned his kufr, أَبَى وَاسْتَكْبَرَ وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ. He refused and he was haughty and proud. Then he said he was of those who disbelieved. Right? So it is literally arrogance of the human that they will not admit their true status as the slave of Allah. And that's what creates kufr. Yes. So, any other questions regarding that? Okay, so the next ayah, which I don't know if I'm gonna go over this too much in detail, just introduce it briefly and we can talk about it next time. The next ayah, kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat.
Imam, I have a quick question. You had mentioned, the angels we're not given free will. But you had mentioned that they believe because they are witnessing at some degree, the power of Allah. Eventually, is it true that eventually, we all believe to begin with, and eventually we will all believe at the end? Is that correct? Once people see in the Day of Judgment the power of Allah, everyone is going to believe. You cannot not believe.
Right. But that's the type of iman that's not accepted, because it's obvious.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. The iman that we are tested with in this world is exactly that we're brought into this world with, like I said, we're cloaked with certain divine attributes of will and power. So, and because of that, and because the soul in the body begins to experience what they experience in this world. And they go on through life kind of almost without a reminder. They are almost blinded, and they think that, yes, I'm in control, or other people are in control, or anything other than Allah. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
That's why the world is a test. That's why it's ibtila. So this is why also many believers are tried more than non-believers, because when you are tried with something you don't like, وَنَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْجُوعِ وَالْخَوْفِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ. The reason why, it's not because he wants us to go through pain. There's no better way of humbling a person than when things don't go their way. True or not?
Correct.
Right? There's no better way of humbling a human who usually thinks that they can get away with whatever they want, right? Then there's no better way of humbling them except that by doing something against their will. So that's why a lot of times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will try believers with these types of things. That's why it's called ibtila. It's a trial. It's not a punishment in the sense of not that a believer can't be punished. If they are punished, there's other reasons for that. But trials mean exactly that. It is there to bring out your true nature. If you're humble and you see that things aren't going your way, you will understand that, oh, see, that's what it is. Allah's in charge. I'm not in charge. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's why Allah does it. But for that's the thing. You can see it in front of your eyes like now. That's what I'm saying. That people who are haughty and proud, I read recently that Trump, one of his aides, was tested positive for COVID-19, and it was said that he got mad about it. You see the arrogance there? Like something doesn't go your way and you get mad about it as if you're in control, right? If a humble person will say, wow, okay, I need to turn to Allah, to God, to the Creator, and say okay, this is a trial to see where my heart is. You get upset about it. That's why I think nothing will ever happen to him, because people like that's what Allah does. They become so deluded that they think they're in charge, that everything will always go their way. Nothing will ever go wrong, And if something does go wrong, it's somebody else's fault, or it's, you get mad about it or sorry. So for a believer, the trial brings out their humility. So the believer, when the trial comes, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, they're patient and they seek help of Allah with the salah, which is your connection with Allah. It's direct ibadah and humbling yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the trial is never there really because Allah has any need of making us miserable. The trial is there to actually, again, reinforce that iman, that basically we're not in control, right? And we need to acknowledge the Creator. When you acknowledge the Creator, when you acknowledge Allah, then all good things happen to you. And that's why Allah will bring the trial, is actually just to turn you back to that state, right? Basically, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to Allah. That's why we say this. We belong to Allah, and to Allah we will return. So you return to that state, and in recompense of it, Allah will bring good to you both in this life and the hereafter. But, as far as people who are haughty and nothing ever happens to them, and they go throughout life believing that they're in power, and that then ultimately they are brought to a state which is death, and maybe sometimes before that too, where they're humiliated, and then they realize that they were not the ones in charge, but by that time it's too late. So iman at that time on the day of Qiyamah is not accepted because it's so obvious. But the small little things that you saw in life that made you know that you were not in charge and you should have turned to Allah, right? And it does happen to them too every once in a while, but that's the point. Like they don't turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They just become increased in their arrogance and in their stubbornness. So, wallahu tabarak wa ta'ala.
Imam, excuse me, please, before we move forward, can you please answer the question that I posted in the chat? If a soul is created wicked, how can it be responsible for doing wicked things when it was supposed to do them? It might be a repetition of the same thing, but like you give an example of a shark that it is supposed to hunt, then why it is accountable for hunting when it's supposed to do that?
Well, it refers also that it's the same, like basically you can't bump your head too much trying to figure out the knowledge of Allah, because that's what qadar and destiny is related to. And you're never going to access that knowledge, okay? It's never going to be possible for you at any stage of human existence, not even in the akhirah, for you to access divine knowledge at that level, okay? Why does Allah remind us of it then? Is to kind of make us feel better, actually, right? To make us feel more confident that it is not us that is going to do anything. It is Allah and His knowledge that make all things happen. So if you are a believer and you have Iman, just be grateful and know that if you have it, it means there's something good in you that Allah knows. And so Allah, Allah will make it easy for you then. Then Allah will make it easy for you then to achieve what it is that He knows that you have destined. But not to think about it in that way that, well, how can they be blamed? Right?
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. I mean, all the actions, they come out of our free will. Whatever we do, it's our free will. Nobody's forcing us to do them.
So you have to remember, everything is a balance, right? We have to be ummatun wasata. So the best way to describe it is this, that the knowledge of Allah about creation, is that accessible to any human mind?
No.
Right. But we do know what we know, okay? What knowledge that we have is that we get up in the morning and make choices, correct?
Yes.
Right. So leave what you have no knowledge of and concentrate on what you do have knowledge of. You understand?
Yes. Yep. Makes sense.
Okay. Leave what you don't have knowledge of and you can't access, and concentrate on what you do have knowledge of. And that is that you make choices. But remember that that's the whole point. There's an excellent ayat that kind of describes why then does Allah even bother us and oblige us to believe in destiny? Because very simple. So that you do not become completely broken-hearted and despondent with what has not come to you, and that you do not become proud and haughty about what has been given to you. You get the point?
Yes.
If you know that this has been destined, then you will not fret over what has not happened, and you will not become proud over what has been given to you. You will realize that ultimately this was in the knowledge of Allah. This was what was destined for me. So I cannot attribute it to a lack of effort or the opposite, or because of my effort. It is all from Allah. So it kind of saves you psychologically. You got it? Like psychologically, it's for your own benefit.
Yes.
And wallahu alam. Any other questions before we wrap up? The next ayah I was going to start, but we ended up going on about these 3 ayat, mashallah. The next ayah is important to understand, though, because this is the idea of us being the best of all nations, right? Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas. But that has to be explained, because most of the Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala anhu made it very clear that this is primarily for the companions, and for any generation after them, then they have to do the same thing that they did, and they have to fulfill the shart, or the condition here in the ayah. So in other words, meaning the latter generations of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are not in general included. And we have to explain that. So in other words, every Muslim today is not included in this. If you want to be included in this, then you have to fulfill the conditions of it. You have to be amongst those people who fulfill the conditions of the ayah, which is to enjoin good and forbid evil and to believe in Allah. So that has to have some explanation, all right? That doesn't mean you don't have Iman. You're still Muslim, but you're not the best because you haven't fulfilled the conditions that have been mentioned in this ayah. If you do, then you will be included in this ayah, right? But there's also good news that in every generation, there will be a group of people, all right, that will always be doing this work of enjoining good and forbidding evil and believing in Allah. But they're not going to be in vogue. They're not going to be the general populace of Muslims. And that's the difference. In other words, and the talkhis of all that is that the ayah first refers to the companions because they, as a group, because ummah also means, by the way, a generation. Another meaning of ummah also means a generation of people. So they were the generation that they, as a group, as a whole, as a jama'ah, the majority had these qualifications. Whereas time goes on, it won't be the majority, it'll be the minority. So in other words, the majority of Muslims will be on one path, but there will be a minority of Muslims who will be fulfilling this condition. And they will be the ones, ulaika humul muflihun. They will be the ones who are successful, and they will be the ones who we can say they are the best of people. They are the best of nation of mankind. But without that, you won't be qualified as this khayra ummah. Does it make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so inshallah, we can leave that for next time. Any other questions? Inshallah.
You know, it's interesting, Imam, you were talking last week about Dajjal, and I was thinking in my head, you know, the Qaf Fe on his forehead.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
you're thinking, how could someone believe this is God? And you know, it's amazing how there are two extremes. You know, the lack of belief in Allah on the one extreme, and then the belief in something so absurd on the other. But people will do it. Of course they'll do it. People believe elephants are God. People believe man are God.
Right.
Isn't it amazing the extremes, how someone can disbelieve something that's so obvious to us, and on the extreme believe something that's so absurd?
Well, the bigger issue here, it is absurd, but the problem is this, that a Dajjal will be given certain capacities and powers to do things that will make people, it will shake their faith because it will seem divine.
Yeah, of course, you know, we have to pray to Allah that we don't fall into that category.
Right, right. So,
of course.
You know, in other words, the falsehood will be very simple to be seen by believers. But, you know, it'll be a test nonetheless because he will be given the impression that he's going to be able to, for instance, bring rain, right? To give life to the dead, right? So in other words, what are these qualities? These are all qualities that, you know, that basically it in some way it gives off the impression that he has absolute power, qudra. You understand? And that'll try people. To give you a good example, although Dajjal is a person who appears, remember we said that the fitna of Dajjal will exist in every era, and it gets like it manifests in different ways. What I'm going to say might sound controversial. Western civilization in many ways had become in the modern era like a precursor to Dajjal, because they, like, you know, when I'm saying it from their own mouths, when Nietzsche said God is dead, part of his philosophy is that after saying that, they themselves will now have to become God. This is what he said. That after the concept of God dies in Western civilization, they themselves must thereafter become God. So now they look at, like I said, like just even now look at the way they're dealing with it. Not once did they humble themselves and say that, you know, we need to call the creator and ask for help. No, we're going to develop a vaccine. You see what I'm saying? We're going to shut everything down. Right? It's like all the emphasis is on their own power, on their own ability to do things like control food chain supplies, economies, people's lives, people's health, people's, you know, like all of that. What is that? You see? stem cell research. I don't want to get too much into this, like, but you get my point, right? It's like they're opening up that door to make themselves even into like their, like the replacement of God, like that absolute power. And has that not been a test for many Muslims?
Yes.
You understand? Who look at that power and say, oh, wow, maybe they have something, right? It's interesting that Dr. Omar Abdullah Farouk in Chicago made a point once about Islamic Spain, Andalus, that certain Western historians, and this is not unfounded, like the concept of the atom as we know it now is actually based on the Spanish Islamic scholar Ibn al-Rushd. That's the fact. Historically speaking, I have books that are not written by Muslims, non-Muslims, that'll admit the same thing. Okay? So the point he was making is that the Islamic society there in Andalus was sophisticated enough. We're talking about the same time where the Renaissance began, right? That they could have advanced just as much as the West had advanced in all of these things that they wanted to. But there was something that made them put a limit on all of that knowledge. And what was that? That's the question. Is respect for the divine. You see, there's a certain limit that we have to have as humans in these knowledges that have been, and secrets that have been given to us, that we can use it and then also become humble. And also there's another aspect for Muslims too, which is وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنَ الْأُولَى, that the akhirah is much better for you than this present life. You can spend all of your time developing all these technologies and industries to try and make life perfect in this world. For a true Muslim, really, honestly, that would be just a waste of time. You understand? It's like, well, why?
So that's a fascinating argument. People argue this a lot, which is not to use Hindus, but the fact of the matter is, their acceleration today compared to Muslims, right? We're seeing it in front of our eyes, and a lot of Muslims, will use the excuse that the priority of the Muslim is different.
Right.
Right? It's not our ultimate goal is not to become the CEO of this and to advance this and keep going and keep going and keep going. Our priority is more so Islam, family, and that has in some way tempered maybe our advancement in this world. And, I think that's a difficult argument because in some ways I believe it. Honestly, I believe it's true, but having that global perspective, is it maybe holding Muslims back a little bit? I don't know.
Well, now we're put in a situation where we don't have really a choice but to engage with the modern world, right? So that's all bridge under the water, as they said. But it's an interesting study nonetheless, because it shows us that it's not because Muslims didn't have the know-how. It's not because Muslims weren't sophisticated. In fact, in those times, that's the point. Andalus and even the Mughal Empire was much more sophisticated than the Hindus. Taj Mahal is good enough proof, right? I mean, but yeah, their outlook on life is tempered by the spirit of Iman, right? So there is a limit that we have how far we want to go with this. Whereas the Western world, and that's why I use that even before Asia now has become part of it too, obviously, but the Western world, when it developed this whole, the Industrial Revolution and the modern era, you have to understand, you study their own history and their philosophies and the things that were in vogue, they literally had to shed religion off completely. It's so strange, even their words, that the time when Europe was dominated by Christianity, they called the Dark Ages. And the time when they shed the influence of the church off completely in religion, they call it the Age of Enlightenment.
Yeah.
It's in the language, it's in the language. And what else is that but a Dajjali type of, you replace any type of faith in God with complete faith in yourself, and a completely materialistic, to the point where they literally began to believe destiny was a joke, right? They denied that completely. God becomes a joke, right? Even now, you see people who are just making fun of the idea, like pray to God. No, there's no hope. You have to have a vaccine. You understand what I'm saying? Like, everything is replaced from faith to absolute confidence in human power, human endeavors, and the material world, which is exactly what Dajjal will be the embodiment of. So it's like that whole mentality, right? That whole civilization was almost like the precursor to set up, and you can see how that tested many Muslims, right? Because instead of saying, okay, we'll engage with the world as it is while keeping our iman intact, a lot of them said that we need to shed Islam and become like them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and I think this is what, you know, is so beautiful about Islam. You know, we're people of the middle ground, right? So we don't sit in the masjid and pray, Allah, take this away from us, take this away from us. We believe in medicine, but understand, right? Understand that ultimately this is not coming from us. The cure is not coming from us. So you have to do both in parallel, right? You have to be, that's why we're people of the middle ground. We're not like a monk sitting in and just praying, God, please take this away from us. No, at the same time, we're working with science, we're working, and you know, ultimately these things need to be balanced. But I think the difference is, you know, in Islam, we understand that the cure is not because of our hands. Ultimately, this comes from Allah. But at the same time, that should not mean that you don't endeavor in finding and doing science and ultimately finding the cure for some of these things.
Right. As the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, tadawa'u, right? Tadawa'u literally means use medicine, but in other words, make an effort to find a cure, because no disease has been sent except that there is a cure for it.
Yes.
Right. So it's literally like what Allah, it's beautiful hadith too, because it's like saying that everything that Allah sends down, even if it's not just a physical ailment, anything that Allah sends down, there's always a cure for it. Okay? There's always something that Allah gave to you to find a way out. There's always something that Allah gave to you to help the situation. Nobody is ever helpless. Allah gives with every hardship, He gives a relief. With every problem, there's a solution. And with every issue, you can find a way out. Allah will make a way out. So it's like that's another way of giving us hope too, that not just the hadith is not just telling us to use medicine, it's also telling us that there's always hope that what He gave you, Allah Ta'ala will, if He sends down something, He also gave you the means to deal with it.
Yes.
So anyhow, okay, I guess we'll stop here, inshallah. Inshallah.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for the the questions and the answer session. Anyone else has any questions? You can put a question in the chat or raise a hand or something before I close this session. Anyone? All right, looks like we are good for this session. Thank you so much. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So, thank you.